Hello everyone, welcome back to German Girl in London. I have recently talked about my sort of situation in a video, and I mentioned that I was looking at possibly buying somewhere soon in the UK. And I want to talk about that a little bit more today because I think it's one of those things that is quite mysterious in a way, because for most of the time that I've been in the UK, I didn't think I could afford to buy anywhere, especially in London. London is so very expensive and rents are just so high. I've always been quite lucky with my rents. I have never had a rent share higher than £600 in London, which is really good. So I've been lucky in that sense, but still, it's still a lot of money to sort of give away, especially if you don't have a super corporate job, if you don't work in finance or if you're a lawyer. Even in London, your salary won't suddenly be 80k magically. So rent, for most people, is probably their biggest expense. It is for me, for sure. And as a renter, you don't have a lot of rights in London. For example, in Germany, most people rent, so there are a lot of laws to protect renters, whereas here in the UK, renting, it's a big thing, but people often own their own place, so renters aren't as protected, and I just feel like it's a lot to pay for not having a lot of rights, especially in London, where flats are usually not in the greatest state and still you have to pay a lot of money for it. So to me, it just feels increasingly like a waste, like I'm throwing away money, because I'm never going to see that money again. And if you just do the maths, on a property like this, you might pay in a year, altogether with your entire household, you might pay over £20,000 for property like that I'm in, and that just seems insane, because £20,000 is basically a house deposit. So yeah, I've now been in London over 7 years, I've rented for over 7 years, so if you do the maths, you can pretty much work out that I could have easily paid off almost half of a mortgage, a little bit less probably, maybe like 35 to 40% of a mortgage. And just thinking about that made me feel a bit sad. So in the last maybe 1.5 to 2 years, I've been increasingly thinking about buying a place in the UK. I mean, at first it was London only. Recently I've kind of thought about commuter belt. I've even thought about moving north, for example, Manchester or even Scotland, because Scotland is very affordable for housing. For me personally, my issue is that I work in the music industry, and the music industry only really has London as a hub. Manchester has a little bit of industry, but almost all of it, like over 90% of it, is in London. So I'm kind of confined in the London area. I could look at the commuter belt, but ideally it would be somewhere near London. So that's kind of what I've narrowed it down to recently. And I just want to talk to you about a few steps that I've taken and a few things that I've looked at to possibly help some other people get on the property ladder and no longer waste your rent. There's nothing wrong if you just want to rent, because there are obviously advantages to renting. You're very flexible, you can move whenever, you don't have to worry about huge debt. Mortgage is obviously debt. So, if you feel like you want to rent, then more power to you. But just personally for me, I would love to own a property in London, because even with Brexit, I think it's very likely that eventually the prices will go up, even if there is going to be a bit of a drop after Brexit. I think that in the long term, London is going to stay a place where people want to be and people want to live. So I think it's relatively safe to buy in London. I'm not looking to buy before Brexit. I don't even know if I'm looking to buy this year. It would be nice, maybe end of the year, but it might be next year. So hopefully at that time we have already kind of seen the impact of Brexit. If Brexit happens, who knows at this point, but yeah. So one of the first things I've done is I set up a Help to Buy ISA. It's a little bit controversial. Some people say it's not a helpful thing at all, but basically Help to Buy ISA is a government sort of scheme to help people save for their first house deposit, even though I'll come to that a bit later, because it's really hard to actually use it for your deposit. But how it works is it's an ISA, it's like an account you can set up with a lot of different banks, and when you first set it up, you can deposit up to £1,200 into it. And then from then on, you can deposit up to £200 every month, not more. The maximum is 200. You can put less, but you can never put more than 200 a month. You have access to your money all the time. You can take out money if you want, but you cannot put it back in if you've already deposited £200. So if I deposit £200, take out 100, I can't put that 100 back because I've already deposited 200 for that month. That's how it works. And the good thing about it is, first of all, you get a pretty good interest rate. It keeps changing. I think it's about 2 point something percent. Maybe it's now 1.8 or something percent. It's better than every savings account I've seen. So just for that reason, you know, it's not a bad place to put your money. But if you are saving for your first home, and first home means you can never have owned another house, you can't have inherited a house, you can't have any stake in a house. If you're a first time sort of buyer looking to buy a house, then the government will give you a 25% bonus on anything you've saved in that account towards your first purchase of a house or a flat. Really confusing, but basically the minimum to qualify is 1,600, so that would be 3 months, 2 months after you've set it up, you could already claim on it, and the maximum that they will pay out is £3,000, so that'll be 12,000 or above. You can save more than 12,000, but you'll never get more than a £3,000 bonus. So for example, if you save £4,000 in this ISA, and you found a house and you want to buy it, then you can get a help to buy agent to apply for the bonus on your behalf, and you'll get £1,000 from the government for free on top, so you have £5,000 in theory. In real life it takes quite a while to get that bonus, so you can't usually actually use it for your cash deposit. It's still nice to get some free money though, so I set it up anyway, even if I'm not going to end up using it. It's a better place to get interest than a savings account, so that's kind of why I did it. There are also lifetime ISAs that are working in a similar way. I haven't looked into them that much, so I would suggest you do your own research, but I know there is one also for first time buyers where you get £1,000 every year, but you need to wait at least a year until you can use it, so it's different. And the other thing I looked into is the help to buy equity loan. Now, this again is a bit of a controversial scheme. I think it ends in 2020, but they've already announced a new one in 2021. But the current scheme is, so it's a loan from the government. So if it's outside of London, you can get a equity loan from the government up to 20% of the value of the property, so that you only need to take out a mortgage for the rest. So you only have to put in a 5% cash deposit, then the government will give you up to 20%, so together you'll have 25%, which the banks will see as your deposit, and then you only have to take out a mortgage for 75%, which will give you a much better sort of rate and a much better sort of mortgage deal than if you were, for example, to go to a bank and only have a 10% cash deposit. They'd give you a worse mortgage. But on the downside, the government will own a fifth of your home. And because they own the percentage, not a sort of number, it can go up or down. So if you buy a flat in Manchester for £200,000, then the government owns 20% of it. Obviously, that would be £40,000. And then if the property value were to go up to be £300,000, then the government suddenly owns £60,000 worth of property equity. So it goes up or down. If the value falls, then the government owns the same percentage, but it's worth less. Very confusing. So for London, it's a bit different. So outside of London, they can give up to 20%, and the property can cost no more than, I'm not actually 100% sure. I think the maximum house price is definitely lower. For London, it's £600,000 for the equity loan, and they give you up to 40% of the percentage. So if you're in London and you want to buy a £500,000 flat and the government gives you a 40% loan, then the government will own a monetary value of £200,000 at the moment that you buy it, and then if it goes up or down, so and so on. For the ISA, the limits are different. So for the ISA to be able to give you the bonus, you have to buy a property outside of London that is no more than 250,000, which I think is quite low. And for London, it's 450,000, whereas the equity loan is up to 600,000. And for the equity loan outside of London, I'm not actually sure. I think it must be about 400 or 450,000. So it's quite confusing because if you want to combine the ISA and the Help to Buy, you have to make sure that the property is eligible for both. You can combine them technically, but yeah, you just have to make sure that they both fit the criteria. So you can't buy a £600,000 flat in London and then use the ISA, you can only use the equity loan. So yeah, that's a mouthful. I'm going to link below a link to the Help to Buy scheme website, which can explain it much better than I can. But yeah, I looked into both of those options, and I even went to a show home somewhere slightly outside of London just to have a look. And yeah, I am in a situation now where I'm slightly torn, because I think the scheme in some parts makes a lot of sense and can be helpful, but other parts of it I'm not so convinced about. The way you can pay back the government equity loan is you can only pay it back in 10% chunks of the current value of the flat or house. And as the loan can increase, especially in London, it's more than likely you might end up paying the government back more money than they originally lend you, because again, they own equity, they didn't just give you a free loan. The loan they give you is interest-free for 5 years, but then there is interest added that goes up every year thereafter. So yeah, it's just a bit of a gamble. And I think personally, if I am going to use Help to Buy London, I don't think I'm going to want the whole 40% loan. I think my sort of threshold would be 25 to 30, I think I could live with, because hopefully the value of the flat would go up so that if I were to sell or remortgage within the 6th year, that it could sort of absorb the equity amount that I owed the government, is just my reasoning. And yeah, it's very complicated, but that's currently what I'm kind of thinking about. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that I will try and buy within London. It obviously won't be very central, but I think it's a good, not really an investment yet, but I think it could be in the future. And it's just pretty secure, and whatever happens with Brexit, I'm going to wait that out and see what happens. But even if I left the UK at one point, it's still not a bad thing to own property in London, I think. So we'll see what happens with that. And in terms of saving for a deposit, I think it's so difficult if you don't have family nearby. So if I had family that lived in London, I would be right there living at home right now, not paying rent or just paying very little rent and just saving all of my income. And I would have done that for maybe a few years, and I would have definitely had enough for a sizable deposit. But if you are working and renting in London whilst trying to save for a deposit, it's very difficult. And unless you have sort of rich family that's just going to chuck you like 20 grand, it's going to take time. I mean, I think the current average age for first-time buyers is nearing 40, I think. I think it's like mid-30s at the moment, which is, you know, it's not old, but it's not young, and it's a little bit concerning if you think about a normal mortgage term of 25 years. So yeah, so that's my thoughts at the moment. I'd really like to hear, obviously, if you've bought a house, how did you do it? What kind of difficulties did you run into? Did you use Help to Buy, be it London or not London? How did you find it? Really like to know what are good ways for you to invest your money, and where do you put your money to save? I really hope this video was somehow helpful for you and that you learned something. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm not an expert. This is just kind of what I've been reading about for the past year or so. I have not decided. I don't really know what I'm doing yet. I'm just kind of looking into things and then gonna make an educated decision once I feel like I know enough. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.